thank you so much to everybody for turning out. This event is always hugely insightful, and a massive, massive thank you goes to every single business that took the time to give us the responses this quarter again. Doing this work that we've been doing when we've been running these quarterly economic indicators for a long time, but it wasn't until part of last year that we looked at this and thought, actually, we're really missing a trick in producing the data and the report that we can actually publish on behalf of the Dundee and Angus business community ourselves. So it's been, hats off to every single one of you that took part, but also to my partners in crime, Shona Dobbie, Sarah at the Chamber, who's helped make this such a brilliant success, and also to Wendy Maltman from the Malting House, who looks after our graphic design and last minute changes. Wendy will know exactly what I'm talking about. This work, make no mistake, the answers that every business gives us are hugely important. So already last week, I had the people from some of the local authorities saying, that work that you do, that quarterly work that you do that gives us output on what businesses are saying and what they're telling you, we really need to see that. Elected members are asking about it. So you need to know that when you give your answers, it doesn't just go into a black hole, but we actually, we find the information hugely useful. It's always picked up by the media, which we thank very much for doing that and helping us with the reach and the extension of that. But also, behind the scenes, this work is definitely helping shape policy and helping us continue to ask for the right business support that businesses are needing. So no matter whether things are going really well for you or things are difficult, or it's just somewhere in between, which is probably where most of us are, it's really important that we can continue to do this work. So I guess that's really enough of an intro from me while we're getting people onto the event and we're getting people onto our Facebook live stream. The 6th of July, we're all starting to book holidays and enjoy a bit of time off, and this is one of our last big pieces of work before the summertime. But also those of you that have been around the Chamber know that we've been talking about our digital transformation project for a long time, and our ambitions in that have been thankfully propped up entirely by the builds we've been doing, the internal expertise that our team have shown, and the tenacity in getting our project nearly over the line. So really exciting and hard work times going on at the Chamber in July. So it's nearly holiday time for some of us in the team, and I'm really looking forward to when we can unveil this project to our members and to the business community in the next couple of weeks. So that's really what has been going on with us, and I'm delighted that we've got a couple of speakers this morning. Those of you that take part in this session will know that Dr. Shona Dobbie from Angus Economics does a power of work, and her presentation is always really thought-provoking and very, very enjoyable. But before we do all that, I'd like to welcome on our event sponsor today. So Wayne Paul, I think Wayne and I did one of the very first Take a Seat interviews that I started to do last year, and it was really, it's brilliant. I really love that series where you kind of get a sneak peek into the kind of the daily life of what people do in our business community, but also the kind of stuff that makes them tick, and the things that they like to do in their spare time, even the kind of year, the time of year that they really have got are drawn to. So if you have jumped onto our YouTube channel and had a look at Wayne's interview and heard a little bit more about the graduate apprenticeship programme and what he was telling us last year, then you're going to hear a little bit more about that today. So Wayne, thank you so much to the University of Dundee and the Graduate Apprenticeships programme, as always, for their support. But over to you. When I can hear you and see your screen, I will let you know, and I'll go on mute.
Perfect. Thank you, Alison.
Looks good.
Fantastic. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Wayne Paul. I am the Industrial Liaison Officer for the University of Dundee's Graduate Apprenticeship Programme. I'm delighted to be here today sponsoring this fantastic event, and I have kindly been given a few minutes to discuss our programme and how it can help the business grow. So since 2017, our aim has been to provide transparent and easily accessible funding and development opportunities to businesses of all sizes, in order to help them develop and grow. Our fully funded programme gives you the opportunity to develop yourself, current or new members of your workforce of all ages, to honours degree level while still working full-time and at no additional cost to your business. Combining work-based learning and high-quality education, graduate apprentices spend 1 day a week studying at the university and the remaining 4 days of the week working in their role. And this allows them to develop their knowledge and practical experience at the same time, creating well-rounded, knowledgeable and experienced individuals. And our programme is proving to be a valuable resource for companies across Scotland, with more and more employers joining the programme every year. We are now working with apprentices from over 100 different employers, and we're looking forward to welcoming apprentices from both current and new employers in our upcoming September intake. Now, within our programme, we offer 5 courses, and these are a BSc Honours in Business Management, a BEng Honours in Civil Engineering, a BEng Honours in Engineering Design and Manufacturing, a BSc Honours in IT Management for Business, and a BSc Honours in IT Software Development. And our programme has been designed to be as simple and easy as possible for all parties involved. You decide whether you would like to develop existing or new members of your workforce, or both, and we will work with you to identify the right person for the programme and then walk you through the application process. Starting in September for 42 weeks of the year and subject to COVID guidelines, graduate apprentices will spend 4 days a week working full-time and 1 day a week studying at the university. In addition to this, apprentices will be required to undertake an average of 79 hours of additional study per week. And after 4 years, graduates will achieve the same level of honours degree if they studied full-time. And with the programme being fully funded by Skills Development Scotland, there is no additional cost for you as a business and no student debt for the apprentice. And each of our courses has been designed around the needs of the industry, with a varied curriculum being taught alongside work-based learning. And this allows your apprentices to not only understand and appreciate the theory behind why things are done in the industry, but also experience how they are done through both practical and work-based learning. And this combination of university and work-based learning has been shown to not only increase the individual's knowledge and understanding, but also broaden their skills and experience. And our programme, as mentioned, is fully funded by Skills Development Scotland. But what does this actually mean for you? Well, effectively, this means that all of the fees associated with studying at the university for the 4-year duration of the programme are paid for under this funding. What the funding does not cover is your employee's wage for the day they are studying at the university, any travel expenses, which some of our employers do choose to cover, or their mentor's time. So what are some of the benefits you can experience as a business from using our programme? Firstly, you can develop the skill sets of your current employees at no additional cost, something that could prove to be very valuable in the current climate. You can even save money if your graduate apprentice is under 25, as you'll not have to cover employer Class 1 national insurance contributions. If you're hiring new employees, the programme allows you to mould them around your internal systems and culture whilst they're receiving a formal education. Staff morale, productivity and retention has been shown to increase as they feel that their company is investing in them as an individual and that they're adding value to the business. They're also developing their knowledge and experience and therefore finding more productive and efficient ways to work. Studying 1 day a week whilst working for 4 days allows apprentices to share and implement what they have learned from their lecturers and fellow apprentices on a weekly basis, bringing new knowledge and skills into your business. The flexible entry and exit points we offer allow you to plan for your skills needs, as we can offer entry straight into the 2nd or 3rd year of our programme based on previous experience. Finally, even though our programme lasts for 4 years, there is no obligation on your behalf to retain your employee for the duration of this time, as we appreciate circumstances can change. But please don't take our word for it. Here is a quote from one of our graduate apprentices, who is also an employer. Catherine joined our programme to develop her own skills for her IT business, and now, having seen the value the programme can offer, is a huge supporter of the programme. Catherine said, "It really is the best of both worlds. We work in a particularly niche sector, and already I've been able to use the knowledge that I'm learning in my lectures in the workplace. I would encourage any employer to look at graduate apprenticeships for its staff, because it's an investment in them and your business." And our programme has been designed to ensure that it's as accessible to as wide a range of applicants as possible. This not only allows as many businesses as possible to take advantage of the opportunity, but also ensures our apprentices are studying alongside people from a wide range of backgrounds and experiences. Our graduate apprenticeships are suitable for both current and new employees who are at least 16 years of age with no maximum age. Studying on the programme must lead to a higher level of qualification in a new area of learning. It's great for those who are completing or have completed a foundation or modern apprenticeship and would like to develop further. And it's also suitable for school leavers with relevant qualifications who would like to work whilst continuing their education. Each of our courses also have entry requirements, and these are just to ensure that our apprentices are not overwhelmed by the level of work they are required to complete. So that's a whistle-stop tour for you. Thanks for your time today. If you would like to find out more or have any questions, please email me at w.paul@dundee.ac.uk, and I'll pass you back to Alison. Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. And for those of you that know the Chamber well, you'll know that we firmly believe in supporting young people in their career journey. And we have been a tiny team, you know, at one point a team of 7, maybe 8 people, and we've always done work experience. We've been delighted to work with the universities and bring interns into our team from time to time. But then we took the bold, quite scary step of bringing in a modern apprentice. And that was a massive learning curve for us, just trying to make sure that we had all the right processes in place to support a young person in our team. And we've also brought in and welcomed foundation apprentices into our team. And again, you know, with the support of Dundee and Angus College, that is just super easy. It's not difficult to do. Even we've done one this whole last year virtually. So I would encourage everybody to have a look at that. And then I'm really proud that the first modern apprentice that we had then went on to actually take up one of the graduate apprenticeship places in business management last year. So yeah, I mean, it's just one of the best ways for you to future-proof your workforce. It's helped us considerably bring down the average age of our team, and it's just brought in a really brilliant dynamic into our team. You know, young people come in with a completely different mindset, a different way of looking at things, and you have to change your business because you have to think about the processes that will support young people. I'm reading or listening to a brilliant book at the moment, Leaders Eat Last, and that tells you that the people that you must nurture the most in your business are the young ones, and the young people that will you know, want to do what you do and want to support your customers and take your business forward. So, and please get in touch with Wayne. I know that young people very much get a lot out of doing that qualification, and I would definitely tell you that employers do too. So whether it's for your for new intake into your business, or to get some of your existing staff to think about upskilling and reskilling, it's very worthwhile. And the funding is it's very good at the moment, so it's the best time to do it. Don't hang off until that changes, if it changes. So thanks again, Wayne. So I think that's all I wanted to kind of say before I pass over to Dr. Shona Dobbie. I always give her her Sunday name, and I know she gives me that slight look, but she deserves every single accolade that's going, because Shona and I've worked together for a long time and our expertise is second to none. So if you're a business that doesn't already use a little bit of external economic analysis or support, then you should definitely be knocking on Shona's door, because she has got, as you'll learn today, a really broad look at what goes on in the globe, as well as a kind of quite a narrow niche, very great way of looking at the data that we get on a local level and understanding what that means for our local economy. So and Shona has to put up with me sharing the slides and then coming back on at the end for questions. So if you've got any questions at all and you're on our event, drop them into the chat. If there's anything on any of the social media channels, drop that into the comments and we'll pick those up, and then we'll just do all of that after we've heard Shona run us through the slides. So Shona, I will start sharing my screen. If you unmute and just let me know that your sound is all okay while I am looking for the PowerPoint.
Okay, thanks Alison, and morning everybody. I think I should apologise ahead of the presentation. There's major roadworks going on outside. The house vibrates from time to time and the dog definitely doesn't like it, so fingers crossed we get through this. Okay, I'm just going to start. Maybe if you can move on a slide or two, Alison, to the GDP slide. That's great, thank you. So I'm just going to start as usual by trying to set the scene against which the survey was undertaken. This chart looks at monthly GDP in the UK. GDP stands for gross domestic product, and it's the best, or at least the most commonly used measure of economic activity. And I think what the chart shows is the difference between the two lockdowns. So, you know, lockdown number 1, we had this massive plunge in activity. Lockdown number 2, which we're just emerging from, much smaller decline, because more industries were able to keep operating to some extent at least. What we saw in April was a big uplift in activity. So we had an increase just over the month of 2.3%, which is equivalent to what our annual increase would normally be. And this was helped by the reopening of activity, first of all in England and then later in the month here in Scotland. This was the fastest monthly growth that we'd had since last July, when the economy had opened after the first lockdown. And it's bringing us back closer to the sort of peak level before the pandemic began. But we're still nearly 4% below that level, 3.7% below to be accurate. In terms of the growth that we saw in April, it was driven very much by the service sector, and that was because of the reopening on the 12th in England, and I think it was the 26th here in Scotland. And that meant that consumer-facing sectors could reopen again for the first time. So overall, consumer-facing sectors actually grew 12.7% on the month, which is just a crazy figure. Retail sales were up 9%, clothing sales up 69%, because we could all go to the shops for the first time. Accommodation sales up 68%, food and beverages, talking about restaurants and cafes, up 39%, hairdressing up 63%. So let's say some crazy figures that we're certainly not used to seeing in the UK, and a sign of the volatility that we're all learning to live with. But as I say, the economy overall still 3.7% below the peak, as you can see from the table on this chart. And it's services which are still pulling the economy down. So yes, we saw that huge improvement in April, but we still need to see some more. Services overall still 4% below the level they were at before we went into the, or before the pandemic started. Production is down 3.1%, manufacturing down 2.4%. But the standout sector is construction. Construction is the only major sector which has actually surpassed the level of activity that it was seeing before the pandemic struck. And I think that's a sign that the construction industry was able to keep going through the second lockdown. They learned to live with social distancing and mask wearing, and a lot of work was deemed to be essential in the second lockdown. So we have seen a big recovery in construction, and as I say, it's the only sector which is now ahead of the game in terms of activity levels. And I think that's one theme which you'll see will keep running through this presentation, that the construction sector is seeing the world in a slightly better way than many other sectors are. Another theme that we're seeing is the opening up of hospitality, obviously. So we're seeing some interesting numbers from that sector too. And on the downside, the oil and gas sector is the one which appears to be struggling. And as I say, you'll see that as we move through some of the slides which show the actual survey results. So moving on to the first slide of our actual survey, this chart is looking at the key results. So the bars in this chart are representing revenue, online sales, orders, profits, cash flow, investment, wages and employment. And what is really positive here is that all 8 of these variables are in positive territory for the first time since the first quarter of 2020. So that's really good to see. These results are all showing what we would call a net balance, and that's calculated by taking the percentage of firms who are reporting a decrease in activity, taking that away from the percentage of firms who are reporting an increase. And if the net balance is positive, then it's giving you a strong message that the trend is a positive one and one of growth. And if the net balance is negative, then it's giving you the opposite signal that growth is deteriorating and activity might even be falling in the sector. So to see the orders number come in as strong as it has, the net balance reading there is 42%. That is a really encouraging signal. It doesn't give us any indication as to the actual growth in orders, the numerical growth, but it does give us a very strong indication that the majority of firms are seeing an increase in orders coming through. The biggest gains since last quarter are in online sales, orders and revenue. So I think that's what you would expect given the situation that we've been coming out of the second lockdown. So we have seen boost to revenue, boost to online sales, and then more ability to look forward, and hence the order number has come in strong as well. If we were to look at these results on more of a sectoral basis, we would see that the construction sector, as I said before, is buoyant. So we've seen it at the national level, and this is just proof coming through that at the local level, the construction sector is also doing well. Hospitality as well, again, clear signs in our survey of recovery with the reopening of many cafes, restaurants and so on, and the oil and gas sector being challenged. So as I say, the results that we're seeing locally are no different from the results which are being seen nationally at the moment. And I think we maybe still need to be just a little bit cautious, because although all 8 variables here are in positive territory, which is great, the 2 lowest ones are profits and cash flow. And these are 2 variables which are extremely important for the survival of any business. So it's just a gentle reminder that yes, things have greatly improved, but there is still fragility out there, and many businesses are still feeling challenged. So that's looking at all of our key results. What we're going to do now is just start to go through most of those one by one and just look at each one in a bit more detail. So starting off on the next slide, which is looking at the change in revenue over the last quarter. What these bars are representing are the percentage of companies who are saying that activity has increased, the percentage saying activity has remained constant, and then the percentage saying activity has decreased. And that allows us to work out the net balances. And the net balances are shown in the table on at the top right hand side. Revenue also obviously an extremely important variable for businesses, and it can be achieved through a mixture of an increase in volume of sales, but also an increase in prices. And what we've seen here is the reflection of the increase in activity from the recovery from the second lockdown, as I say. The second lockdown wasn't as sharp as the first one, but it went on for nearly 4 months. So it was more of a sort of long haul. And it's really good to see then that 91% of local businesses are saying that the revenue that they've raised in Scotland has increased, or at least remained constant over the last 3 months. So that is an encouraging figure. All of the net balances in this chart, as you can see in the table, are positive apart from export sales. So a little bit discouraging to see that exports are still being challenged. And whereas we had 48% of respondents saying that revenue in Scotland had increased, 50% of respondents said that their export sales had decreased. So we're seeing this sort of complete contrast between domestic sales and foreign sales at the moment. Hopefully it's just that the export sales have been a little bit later to get going again, But that's something which we should be able to pick up on in the next survey to see if that has been the case, or whether this is a more serious challenge for exporters. If we were to look at this chart on a sectoral basis, there are 3 sectors which stand out in terms of strong trends. So the strong positive trend in the arts and creative sector, construction and hospitality. So in terms of overall sales, these 3 sectors have reported not the biggest increase in numerical terms, but the most companies in these sectors all saying that their sales have increased. So a very strong trend there. But if we were to look at the sector which is most challenged, it is clearly the oil and gas sector, which does seem to be struggling at the moment. If we were to look at export sales, there are some sectors which are doing okay. So although the overall measure is disappointing, if we were to look at agriculture, business services and education, they were actually reporting that export sales had turned around and were much more stable. So still some encouragement within these numbers. So I think that, you know, while the revenue numbers are good and they're giving us a clear indication that we're seeing some recovery from the lockdown, the revenue numbers are telling us more what's happening now, and what we're interested in is what's going to happen. So if we look at the next slide, this is looking at the change in orders, and that's giving us a better signal about the future. There we go. So, oops, that's it. So this chart is really important because orders are such an important factor for any company. It's good to have revenue coming in at the moment, but you need to have some guideline as to what's happening in the future, and orders gives us more detail on that. This, as you saw from the key variables chart, this was actually the strongest of all our key variables in the last quarter, and we definitely have to take some encouragement from that. So all of the sectors have improved greatly from last time, and the net balance overall, as you can see from the small table at the top right hand side, it's improved from -13 last time to +42% this time, which is hugely encouraging. It's risen by 56 points, and we couldn't really ask for much more than that. Now we've got 50% of all businesses in the area saying that orders have increased. And last time that was just 23%. So again, big improvement there. And we've got just 10% of businesses saying that orders in Scotland have decreased. And although that's disappointing, the last time that was a whopping 42%. So again, we are seeing a much more encouraging trend. And we've got 91% of firms saying that orders have either increased or remained constant. So again, really comforting to see that. In terms of sales to the rest of the UK, 86% of companies are saying that orders have either increased or stayed constant. So that's a good number. And the results for the export orders look a little bit weaker. The net balance there is 0. And this is because 25% of the companies who export are saying that their orders are increasing, but that's matched by 25% saying their exports have decreased, or their orders have decreased. And that's why we're getting the net balance of 0. So it's a very split sector. As I say, some companies doing well, some companies struggling on the export side, and not very much going on in the middle. So it's definitely very polarized. If we were to look at these results on a sectoral basis, we would see that the agricultural sector, arts and creative sector, construction, education and hospitality were all showing strong improvement in orders. And the weakest sector, and there was only one sector really which was particularly weak, and that's the oil and gas sector, which not only isn't doing well in terms of revenue at the moment, but is also facing a more challenging 3 months ahead, given that the orders are also a bit weaker. So we've looked at revenue, we've looked at orders, and these give us some indication of what's likely to happen, and that allows companies to make decisions about their operating capacity. And that's what we're looking at in this next slide, which is showing the percentage of capacity which firms are working at. I mean, obviously not every firm can be operating at 100% capacity all the time. And operating capacity is a really important variable to look at, because it's giving us an idea of how efficiently the companies are able to work at the moment, and the amount of spare capacity which is still in the system. The results here are telling us that businesses are now operating at around 61% of capacity on average, and that is definitely an improvement from the first quarter. When we did this survey last time, the overall total operating capacity, which you can see at the very bottom bar on the chart, that was only 49%. So we've seen an improvement from 49 up to 61, which is definitely a good improvement and an encouraging move. What's not so good is the fact that 54% of the respondents in our survey said that their businesses were still operating below capacity. So that suggests that costs are probably running a bit higher than they need to be on a unit basis, and that can obviously challenge profitability and also cash flow. But you know, there are two sides to every story. So 15% of businesses said that they're operating above normal capacity. And this was certainly the case in the construction sector, where 50% of the respondents in our survey said they were operating above normal capacity. And the remaining 50% said they were operating at normal capacity. So no one in that sector is operating below normal levels, which is very encouraging, and is another reason for us to say that the construction sector is definitely the strongest sector in our region at the moment. And you can see that on this chart, the construction sector's overall operating capacity is running at 90% of what is available. It's followed by finance, by agriculture, I should say, at 75%, and then finance and insurance at 73%. So hospitality is the sector which has seen a huge improvement. So last time it was just 10, and this time it's jumped up to 60% operating capacity, again reflecting the reopening of many businesses. At the other end of the scale, we've got both education and the tourism sectors, both operating at just 10% of capacity, and these are followed by the arts and creative sector and oil and gas, which are both operating at just 20%. So very split pattern here between the sectors which are doing well and operating at fairly high levels of capacity in this world, and the sectors which are still really challenged and operating at extremely low levels of capacity, and therefore facing inefficient type of production and much more costly production on a unit basis. The next feature that I want to look at is employment. But before we look at the employment numbers for our sector, I wanted to just set the scene by looking at employment across the economy as a whole. I mean, any of you that have tuned into these presentations before will know that I've been a bit more sceptical about the employment numbers coming through. So our survey's been telling us that employment was still positive, and I've always been a bit more guarded, expecting maybe the employment numbers to deteriorate a bit, but there is no evidence of that. So our survey has been right, which I'm glad to say. And what this chart is looking at is what the economy as a whole is facing and where the weaknesses in employment are lying. So it's not showing every sector, it's a selection of sectors, and it's showing where the loss of employment has actually fallen. And what the chart is showing is that there has been a loss of employment across the economy, and that's despite the furlough scheme and some of the other government measures which are aiming to keep businesses afloat. So definitely they've helped hugely, there's no denying that, but there's some areas which they haven't been able to help to such a large extent. So the purple bars on this chart show the annual percentage change in each category over the last year, and the pink bars are showing the quarterly change over the quarterly change in employment levels. And you can see from the chart that most of the negative moves occurred more than 3 months ago. They were occurring last year. So it's not that we've seen massive deterioration through the second lockdown. Most of the damage was done in the first lockdown, and there just hasn't been recovery there. The arts and entertainment sector, which there's a lot of publicity about at the moment, it's clearly done worse over the last year. It's lost 15% of its employees, which is a huge number. And the last 3 months hasn't been good either for that sector. So theatres and other venues still largely closed, and employment levels have fallen 3% just over the last 3 months alone. The other sector to be really badly hit is accommodation and food services. So this kind of relates to our hospitality and tourism sectors in our survey. And here we've seen employment falling 14% across the UK as a whole over the last year. And again, some of that has been within the last 3 months. The sectors where we've seen a swing over the last 3 months with some rehiring are support services, construction. There we go again with signs of strength in the construction sector, although it's just had a tiny upward move, but at least it is upwards. And the retail sector, and I think that reflects the reopening of stores and the need to bring back and hire more staff. The two sectors at the bottom of the chart are interesting because employment has increased over the last year and over the last quarter in these sectors, but they're public sector as opposed to private businesses and the corporate sector. So they're not really included in our study. And so we're not seeing the same sort of reflection of big increases in employment, but undeniably and not surprisingly, in health and social work and public administration, we have seen the need for more staff over the last year. So that's the case nationally. If we look at the next chart now, it's showing the situation in our region. And remember, these are covering private sector and largely smaller companies than the previous chart, which is looking at the economy as a whole and includes some fairly large companies. And what it's showing is the last 3 months, which is the green bars, and then expectations for the future, which are the pink bars. So ideally, we'd like to see everything positive, but if that isn't possible, we do want to see the pink bars being positive, showing us that companies are more optimistic as we go forward. So what's encouraging on this chart is that there's only one sector with a negative green bar. So one sector in which the employment situation has deteriorated over the last 3 months, and that's the oil and gas sector. And that probably is no surprise given the negative readings we've had there for revenue and orders and so on. So again, it's making sense, but it's a shame to see this industry being so challenged. But what we're seeing, a couple of weaker sectors are arts and creative, where there's just been a zero net balance in terms of employment situation over the last 3 months and expectations. So just suggesting no move at all. It's not great, but at least it's showing stability. And I think the other areas that we're seeing a slightly surprising result is in tourism, where last 3 months we've seen much more positive trend in employment, but the respondents from that sector are much more cautious about the future. So we've seen a positive reading for the last 3 months, but we're seeing a negative reading for the next 3 months. So I think the message coming through is, yes, things are improving, but we're still very cautious and may not be hiring in the next 3 months. We'll just wait and see what happens. So the overall assessment of the employment situation in our sector, local sector, it's definitely holding up a lot better than I had expected to see. So definitely encouraged by that. And, you know, I think what we're seeing is stabilisation at least. Quite a few of the bars showing expectations are in positive territory, which is encouraging. And I think while the tourism sector is feeling a lot of uncertainty, which is no surprise, the only real deterioration that we've seen is in the oil and gas sector. So there's quite a lot of encouragement to be taken from this survey. And yet again, I'm hoping that the expectations prove to be realistic, and that next time we'll see a lot more strength on in terms of the green bars showing the current situation. This next chart that we're going to look at is showing the changes in business optimism. And in this case, again, we've got two sets of bars. The purple bars are showing how companies are gauging their optimism now with how they felt 3 months ago. And the pink bars are showing how they gauge their optimism now compared to how they felt a year ago during the first lockdown, or we were just emerging from the first lockdown at that point. It's really encouraging to see in this chart that we've got no negative readings. So at worst, local business sectors are feeling the same level of confidence as before. So there's no deterioration. So we'll have to take a lot of heart from that. If we start with the pink bars, which is showing how companies assess their optimism compared to last year, on a sectoral basis, the agricultural sector, arts and creative, the construction sector, hospitality and tourism are all leading the way, because all respondents from these sectors were saying they were more confident now than they were last year. So that's really encouraging to see. And even looking over the last 3 months, we're seeing more confidence from the agricultural sector, the arts sector, hospitality and tourism. So again, that's good to see. Sectors where their opinions remain a bit more guarded about the future include the education sector, the oil and gas sector with good cause, and water supply. And in these sectors, there's been no change in optimism over the last 3 months. So why are firms feeling more confident? Obviously, there's been progress made in the war against COVID. We asked in the survey, you know, what factors are you more concerned about now than you were before? And more than 40% of all the respondents were saying that although they're feeling more optimistic in general, there are still some factors which are concerning them, and the main one appeared to be taxation. So fears of the future. The other cause for concern at the moment was inflation. So what I'm going to look at in the next few slides is both of these factors to give us some idea of what might happen to taxation and inflation, and whether we're likely to see businesses remain as optimistic as they appear to be in this survey. So the next chart is looking at what we call the public sector net borrowing as a percentage of GDP. So it's really looking at the government's budget deficit. The chart goes all the way back to basically the start of the last century. And you can see some pretty big peaks in borrowing in the past. So World War I stands out, where borrowing reached a level well over 25%, the same in World War II. And you can see the financial market crisis, 2008, 2009, it peaked to a level of 10%, which felt bad at the time, but was nothing like the level that we'd seen during the two world wars. So what we're seeing now, and I hope you can see the right-hand side of the chart, we're seeing that the government deficit has increased to a level of round about 15% of GDP, just under that. And that's actually a peacetime record in the deficit. But it is being financed. So we're seeing signs that, yes, the public sector finances are clearly under strain. We've got cause to be concerned that taxes may have to rise, and that's obviously very challenging for the corporate sector. But up to this point, and signs are that even moving forward a bit, the government is able to finance this by relatively cheap borrowing. So the revenue in 2020-21, the financial year, revenue came at 790 billion, just over that, and their spending was over $1 trillion. The deficit came in at just over 300 billion, but they've been able, and that's what gave us this 14% of GDP deficit. But they've been able to borrow 303 billion, which works out at 4,500 per head in the UK. Their borrowing is effectively financing 27%, or £1 in every £3.60 of public spending. So it's relatively high. They've had to spend to support public services, the corporate sector and households. So the spending has been justified. It's not UK specific, it's going on right around the world. So when we look at international comparisons, we're not really much worse than any other country. So I think I'd say it's justifiable. The interest rates the government is able to borrow at are still very low. The 10-year bond yield is only 0.7%, and they're able to borrow over 30 years at just 1.2%. So they are getting through this. They're able to finance it, as I say, largely from borrowing. And if that remains the case, then taxes shouldn't have to increase too much. The risk is that borrowing increases further. If the economy doesn't recover quickly enough, the deficit level could remain high. If we see other countries showing an improvement in their public finances and we aren't, then investors might not be so keen to invest in this country, or the bond yield could rise, and that makes borrowing more expensive for the government and becomes much more challenging for them to pay the interest on all of the borrowing. I mean, at the moment, although they've borrowed such huge amounts, the interest that they're paying is only equivalent to 1% of GDP. So it's actually a historical low, which is why I'm not too concerned by this at the moment. But we do need to keep an eye on what's happening, our international comparison, and we need to see the economy recovering so that this level of borrowing is the peak and we start to see the deficit fall from here. So we're not out of the woods by any means, and there is still some threat to taxation, but as of today, I'm not too concerned about it. And I think politically and economically, the government doesn't want to increase the tax burden at the moment when so many companies are challenged. They want to see the economy recover from this. And I think they would be taking a chance of deterring the recovery if they were to tax too heavily. So yes, it is there, it is a concern, but I wouldn't be too worried about it at the moment, but we need to watch some factors and gauge what's happening. The next area which I say people are concerned about is inflation. And this next chart is looking at the monthly contribution to inflation. I think lots of people are worrying about inflation at the moment because over the last 4 months, we've seen quite a big uptick. So it started off at 0.7, went to 1%, then 1.6% in April, and now 2.1% in May. 2% is the target for the Monetary Policy Committee to meet. And so as soon as inflation goes above 2%, alarm bells start to go off and people get very concerned. The monthly change that we saw this time in May was 0.5. That's actually exactly the same as the monthly change last year. And what this chart is looking at is how you get to that 0.5. So where that 0.5 increase in inflation is coming from. The largest contribution, as you can see from the chart, came from the transport sector. So this contributed 0.16 points to the 0.5. Prices had been falling very sharply at this point last year. So the petrol price had been falling. I think it fell 2.8% last year between April and May, but this year it's risen by 1.7 pence. So that's how you get this big contribution to inflation. And the same with the diesel price, that had been falling at this time last year and has increased during May of this year. So it's a swing factor. I think a lot of it has to do with the timing of lockdowns and re-emerging from lockdown, and the fact that activity was able to keep going more in the second lockdown. So I'm not too concerned about that, but we need to keep an eye on the oil price going forward from here. The second big contributor was recreation and culture. That seems to have been price increases in games, toys and hobbies, computer game downloads in particular, and recording media, music downloads, DVDs and CDs, etc. And the feeling is that it's reflecting more of a change in pattern of demand over the last year rather than a big inflationary rise, even in the sector alone. So nothing to worry about too much there. And the same with the third sector, which is pushing inflation. It was clothing and footwear. And again, it's largely due to timing. It's largely due to lockdowns disturbing the normal seasonal pattern of new stock coming in and then sales periods to get rid of old stock. So clothing and footwear contributed 0.13 points to inflation. Prices rose significantly between April and May this year, but last year they were very weak because we were in lockdown between April and May of last year, whereas this year we were opening up. So there was much less discounting than you would normally see at this time of year. And last year there was an awful lot of discounting because the retailers were trying to clear stock. So again, as I say, I think it's more to do with the timing effect and the loss of the seasonal flow in retail. And again, not anything to get too worried about at this point in time. You can also see on the chart that restaurants and hotels contributed to inflation. And again, this is highlighting the reopening of the sector. So as I'm saying, yes, inflation is picking up, but I think it's largely to do with the fact that it was so weak last year because activity was so depressed. But this year, given that activity was able to keep going through the lockdown, and given that we've had another sort of boost as we emerge back into post-lockdown period, we are seeing activity and prices picking up, but not to a level that we need to worry about at the moment. Inflation is worth worrying about once it gets into wages, and there are no signs of that at the moment. So again, we need to watch the employment situation and what's happening to wages, but I wouldn't be losing any sleepless nights over this at the moment. And I think the Bank of England themselves are saying that they're giving the message they're happy to sort of try and ride this out, because there are specific reasons for inflation going above target. So with that in mind, the next chart is looking at revenue expectations over the next 3 months. So as I say, revenue is a mixture of sales quantity and sales prices. So it is partly reflecting people's views of inflation as well. So what are local businesses expecting to happen over the next 3 months? Well, this chart shows that on balance, they are expecting revenues to grow further, which is really encouraging. On the left-hand side of the chart, you can see that 68% of businesses are expecting total revenue to increase, 28% expect it to remain at constant levels. And that's telling us then that 96% are expecting no deterioration in revenue, which is really good news at this point in time. And even export sales, which you can see on the right-hand side of the chart, are expected to bring in more revenue overall. So that is particularly encouraging, because when we looked at current revenue, the export sector was weak, but looking forward, it's definitely much stronger. On a sector basis, revenue expectations are strongest in the agricultural sector, the arts and creative sector, construction, education, finance and insurance, hospitality and tourism. So quite a lot of sectors really positive about revenue coming through in the next 3 months. In fact, the oil and gas sector is the only one in which respondents expect revenue to decrease over the next 3 months. So very challenging for the oil and gas sector, but very encouraging for our region as a whole. So it's good to see that, you know, companies are expecting revenue to increase. I think to try and gauge whether companies are expecting this to come through in terms of a volume increase or a price increase, we looked at the respondents' views on prices over the next 3 months, and the arts and creative sector, construction, expect prices to increase, but other sectors not so much, not expecting any falls in prices, but not expecting prices to rise from here. So that's telling us that the revenue expectations are really built on volume, and we can take even more encouragement from that. It's not an inflationary boost, it's an activity boost. And that's really all that we can hope to see. So this next chart is looking at the operational impact of COVID on local businesses. And we've looked at this chart for several quarters now. And the shape of the chart is pretty much the same as it was last time. But the numbers are telling us that even more firms have made some kind of move. So flexible working and changes to offices and working spaces are the two biggest factors here. More than 50% of respondents have made changes in these areas, and it looks like these could be with us for some time to come. The percentage this time is slightly lower in terms of companies who've made changes to their products or services, so that's the very top bar, and in terms of reduction to staff hours. So we're not seeing so many companies reducing from here, although we've already seen reductions being made throughout the pandemic. So that's maybe beginning to stabilise. Overall, though, I think the chart just highlights the flexibility of local businesses. They've been able to introduce all of these changes in a relatively short period of time and in a very challenging period of time. So, as I say, it's highlighting the flexibility of businesses and the adaptability and ability to embrace change. We had some additional questions in this particular survey about expectations regarding vaccinations, physical distancing and face coverings. And respondents from our area were, when asked about would you be asking for proof of vaccinations, the overall feeling seemed to be no. They wouldn't be asking for proof of vaccination from customers, from staff, or even from suppliers. Very roughly about 80% of respondents said they had no plans to do this, and less than 20% were unsure as to whether this might be something that they need to introduce. But there was much greater expectation that physical distancing will continue. So about 75% of respondents thought that this would continue to be the case in our area for some time to come. And there were very mixed views over whether face coverings should be mandatory over the next year. Less than 40% said yes, they should be, and just over 40% said no, they shouldn't be. So very split, and that probably reflects individual sectors and whether you're consumer facing or not. So I think there's particular reasons as to why people replied in the way that they did. One factor which did come through is that office-based home working is clearly expected to continue for some time, and quite a lot of respondents expect some sort of hybrid model from here with a mixture of home working and office working going forward. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on over the next few months, and again just reflects the flexibility that we've seen and can probably expect to continue to see. So this next chart, and we're getting close to the end now, you'll be glad to hear, but this chart is showing expectations of future business prospects. So it's sort of pulling together respondents' feelings of all of the variables that we've looked at, and asking respondents, how do you gauge your business prospects over the next year? And I think it's really encouraging to see that no sector is displaying a negative balance. The weakest sector is water supply, which is expecting activity to remain round about the same as where it is now. All other sectors are expecting an increase. And you can see from the very bottom chart that for the region as a whole, the net balance is pretty strong. In fact, 74% of businesses were saying they expect activity to improve over the next 12 months, and only 4% are saying they expect deterioration. So these are really good numbers. In terms of sectors, the most optimistic sectors are agriculture, arts and creative, education, finance and insurance, oil and gas and tourism. But other sectors, as you can see from the chart, are also expecting things to improve. So there's not really much more I can say about this chart. It's very encouraging, and we do ask companies, do you see any threat to your survival over the next 12 months? And it's great to be able to report that nobody had any concerns about that. So that we can definitely take some encouragement from that. So moving on now, we pull everything together, and we were able to create a business sentiment indicator, and you can see that the latest readings on that have both improved sharply in terms of current conditions, which is the blue line on the chart, and expectations, which is the gold line. The current conditions indicator is very encouraging. It's moved very sharply upwards. It was -22 last time, it's now +17, so huge upward swing. And this is actually the highest reading recorded since June of 2019, long before the pandemic started. And our expectations index, which reflects the assessment of future trading and activity, that's also increased significantly. It was +28 in March, and it's moved much higher now to a record level of 41% today. So this is all good news. It confirms not only have current conditions improved, but businesses are expecting further improvement over the next few months. And we have an overall business sentiment indicator which pulls these two together, and that has risen from +3 to +29. So again, that is the highest reading recorded since March of 2019. So in terms of sentiment, I think we're getting there. We've come through the worst of all this, and we're able to look forward now with a lot more confidence, and that has to be really encouraging because it has been a very long haul over the last 15 months. So in conclusion, The final slide here is a word map composed of the key words and the most frequently used words in the survey when respondents were asked to give more explanation about something or to raise any issues which were still concerning them. So this is still dominated by COVID, obviously, but we have more emphasis now on the more positive aspects of it. So reduced infection and emphasis on looking forward, the vaccinations working, etc. So it's really good that, you know, we've got the ability to look forward now. It almost seems a luxury having battled through the last year. Other keywords that came up in the survey included travel, can't we all wait to be able to really do that again, and hospitality. And businesses also talking about planning for the future, confidence, opportunities, all very positive terms that have come through for the first time. So yeah, we take great heart from this. But as an economist and a dismal scientist, as we call ourselves, I just want to think, okay, what can go wrong here? And thankfully, not too much. I think we are getting through all. The vaccines have made a huge difference to everything. The one thing which I think, you know, could derail the recovery would be if there was a variant of the vaccine, of the virus that came through that was vaccine resistant. But I'm not a scientist, I've got absolutely no idea about that, but I do think the probability is probably pretty small. So it would, small probability, but big consequences were it to happen. But if we can get through without that, then I think the outlook looks positive. The economy is not home and dry yet, there are still some challenges, but given what we've come through, the challenges ahead don't seem to be too onerous, and I'm pretty hopeful that when we do the survey next time, we'll be seeing even better results. That's all from me. Over to you, Alison.
Great, thank you so much, Shona, as always. So if anybody's got any questions they kind of want to put to Shona, or even just any observations, then please drop those into the chat. I'd be happy to kind of bring anything up. Shona, a couple of questions from me. It's incredibly positive, I think, lots of aspects of what we're seeing. I'm interested in, I guess, well, an observation from me, first of all, in that, you know, we've got so many sectors in our region that that helps us almost spread the risk of, you know, one sector having difficulties, like we're seeing oil and gas reporting. So, you know, I guess that's, you know, we often talk when we're dealing with inward investors and we're talking to people about, you know, well, you know, what are those key sectors that drive your local economy? And I say, well, I don't actually have enough fingers to answer that question, because there are so many shining lights. But construction is an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's amazing to see that showing so positive, because you know, there have been times when it's not been feeling like that, but we're also hearing that there have been quite significant issues in supply chain in that industry in terms of the cost of materials, or just getting their hands on the materials that are needed. So are you seeing that playing out much? I mean, I guess locally will be the same as it would, the picture would be nationally and even internationally, but that must be something that's a bit on the radar at the moment, I guess.
Yes, it showed up slightly, the concerns about cost of materials, but it wasn't across the sector, the construction sector. So we can't identify the firms who are answering our survey, so we don't really know which specific areas they're working in, and I think that's a good thing, that the survey isn't anonymous. Where it did show up in our results was more in manufacturing, so in that sector there was a clear concern about the cost of raw materials. In other sectors, there was more concern about overheads, other overheads, rather than physical cost of material. So I was interpreting that as being service sector increases. So insurances and factors like that were of concern. But in manufacturing, yes, there was a clear supply chain issue, either in terms of shortages, which some companies talked about, or in terms of prices. And yes, there was some sign of that in construction, but it wasn't across the board.
Oh, that's good. That's really good to hear. And is that something that will already have made its impact in the inflation numbers for the UK, do you think, or is it impossible to tell whether it's still got a bit of a tail to go?
The cost of goods would show up first of all in import prices, and then it moves from there into general producer prices and then into consumer prices. So it will only show up in our inflation numbers once it's passed on to the consumer. If it isn't passed on, it doesn't show. And there are some signs in specific areas, so it's not affecting the headline numbers greatly yet, but within all the detail, there are clearly some areas where price rises are more significant. But it could be that way at the start of the chain, the companies selling the goods are not able to pass the full price increase on, and they're taking some of the hit and the buyer's taking some of the hit, and so we're not seeing the complete trend yet. So I think it's maybe a little bit early, and I think it's something we could see, but it will only get into inflation if it is fully passed on to the consumer.
Something to watch then. That's really useful. We've also heard from a number of sectors, and construction is definitely one, but also I would say hospitality and retail, even healthcare. It's about people and not enough people to fill the jobs that there currently are. And you don't speculate. I fully get that, but I think as the furlough scheme starts to change, and obviously this month we've got flexible furlough, as of next month the kind of the financial support begins to change in the furlough scheme, and I guess there's a niggle of concern, I think, about how many people are on furlough and they're protected a bit from the unemployment market, but that's then stopping people that need to grow and want to grow and get back to higher operating capacity, actually getting enough people to kind of get their doors open to the level they want.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on in the labour market at the moment, and labour market numbers are always a lagging indicator, and I think this time it will be particularly so. What we're seeing, certainly the furlough scheme and some of the other support measures have helped, so companies have been able to keep employees on the books. But anecdotally, it does seem as like a lot of people who worked in hospitality have taken jobs now in other sectors and may not go back to hospitality even when it opens. They may just stay in the sectors where they found employment. Once the furlough scheme comes to an end, companies may be forced to lay people off, because unless the revenue comes in pretty strongly, they're not going to be able to keep the number of staff that they had. And I did wonder in our results, this sort of strange result in the tourism sector, where yes, they've taken people on, but we're more concerned about maybe having to let people go in the next period, is a reflection of that. So companies that seem to be just sort of try it and see, but wanting to open, here we are, please come buy our services, but it's early days yet, and we need to see how active everybody is in terms of going back into restaurants and theatres, hotels, etc. So we can't be certain at the moment, but there are definitely still some risks, and that's why I say the economy isn't through it all yet. There's probably still another uptick in unemployment, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the issues that everybody is asking about, and you highlighted is travel, and businesses need to be able to do international travel. It's just that's really getting in the way of, I think, a future order bank. And we can do an awful lot virtually, but but there is nothing better than being able to get out and see your customers. And I think the uncertainty of all of that is really impacting on businesses. But then the other side of that is not enough people coming into the UK and into those hospitality businesses. So they probably know that they're riding out a bit of a staycation wave at the moment, and yet wondering, you know, what happens. Because I don't think any of us really understand whether we'll still feel like you know, heading to the Highlands of Scotland in November, or whether we'll have, you know, we'll have run out of our staycation money by then, and we'll have, you know, we're just in a very interesting period, and like you said, you know, getting theatres back up to capacity, that's another thing that will pull people back out, and as we can, you know, do events and other things, and we can actually start to go places in the comfort and safety of a crowd, then, you know, that will again hopefully have a bit of another uptake. Okay, something that I probably doesn't come out in our survey, but I just thought it was worth talking about is, you know, we've, particularly in our region, we've got a fair number of public sector employees in the kind of the workforce picture, and that will be the same in many other cities. And I think, you know, there are no signs yet that the public sector are kind of going to begin to reopen offices. And I suppose, you know, it's not really a question for Shona, it's more a plea, along with the travel, is, you know, I think we are seeing, you know, the private sector, and the Chamber is one of them, that have made very gentle baby steps into, you know, thinking about the office environment and this hybrid working. But, you know, we've got a considerable number of public sector people that we could do with their footsteps in Dundee city centre and some of the other towns in the region. And I know other cities will have even higher numbers. But there's a concern. I think we're slightly luckier in that there'll be less public transport into our city to these kind of jobs, but I think we are hearing that there's a bit of a, you know, a worry about public transport, and interesting times at the moment with what's happening south of the border in terms of the unrolling of restrictions and what we're hearing north of the border, and that definitely plays out, I think, in terms of how businesses feel about how they can trade and how positive people are feeling. But I'm pleased to see that none of that, well, not a lot of that, seems to be coming through in our numbers in terms of that business sentiment indicator, Shona. A question, I guess, about that, because, you know, you understand how these things work an awful lot better than I do, but how confident can we be in businesses meeting those future outlook ambitions that they've got, I guess is the right way to put it, and what might get in the way of that, do you think?
I think we can be fairly confident, given that so far when we've done these surveys, the expectations from one survey have generally been met in the next survey, apart from obviously heading into lockdown, etc., which nobody, you know, really expected. So I take from that the responses we get are very genuine, very well thought through, and very accurate. And so we can take some comfort from that. What we can't tell from our survey, so if we get a net balance of 100, that doesn't tell us that sales are going to increase by 100% or 10%. You know, we can't put a figure on it. We just know that every company in that sector who's replied to our survey is saying that things are going to get better. Now, they might just get better by 1%. They might be a lot more positive than that. We can't really tell. And that's why I'm saying, yes, the results are really encouraging when we look at the key figures, etc. But there is still some fragility there. There's still, I need to be a little bit cautious as we open up. So I feel all the pieces are coming into place, but there are still some risks out there.
And in terms of some of the points that you talked about in inflation, so I was interested in the transport costs that have risen, and I wonder if you know, or if we might think that is some of that down to European logistics costs, because we saw that in early surveys, didn't we, that Brexit had an impact of actually, you know, costs rising in terms of European hauliers or kind of the haulage market in general. But we also know that there's a shortage of drivers. So could, you know, the cost of drivers and the cost of logistics and transport actually be having a bit of a detrimental effect on all of that, do you think?
Yep, that can definitely have an impact. And, you know, even if petrol prices rise, it affects everything, because all the goods have to be transported, you know, all the food, etc., to supermarkets and that. So if transport costs rise, it tends to feed through the whole economy eventually. But I think what's been happening this time round is that the oil price fell very sharply last year when we went into lockdown. There was a huge plunge in the oil price, petrol prices fell. And I think what we're seeing in these particular numbers is the reversion of that. So as I say, the oil price is now around about 75. It's actually, I think it's at its highest level for a couple of years. And there's a situation going on at the moment with OPEC and its allies trying to reach an agreement on output, oil output, which will have an impact on the price from here. So again, that's something that we need to watch and could threaten activity. But the oil price has risen about 40–50% just in the first half of this year. So I think at the moment that is the driving force behind it. And yes, the transport costs, the logistics, it's the oil price impact. But yes, going forward, that will then start to feed through into other transport, you know, the general transport costs of moving goods from one place to another. So yes, it is important, but I don't think it's really come through yet. I think it's purely petrol prices.
Perfect. Okay, well, I think that's kind of all the questions I had, and I think what we'll do is just do a bit of a wrap up, and I'd like to say a huge thank you again to you, Shona. It's hugely insightful, and I think you know, being able to get a sense of what's happening in our local economy and what businesses are thinking is absolutely useful for us all. I know last quarter we had a very significant inward investor come and view our last event, and then, you know, that definitely shaped their thinking about what the business environment was like in our area, how much they felt, you know, it would be a good play to come and consider investing in this region as opposed to other parts of Scotland and the UK. And for businesses that might be in the service industry, they could be looking at your results and saying, well, actually, you know, if I hadn't maybe considered construction or some of these other sectors as ones that, you know, were a potential market for me. So we've been doing a lot of thinking about how do we support businesses to consider different growth strategies, and I think that is going to be the thing, is as we all very much are in, this is beyond recovery mode now, isn't it? People are genuinely now starting to kind of feel that there's a bit of a safer environment to begin to properly trade out of this and look to next year. But we've had so much change. It's obvious that change is not done with us yet, and a lot of that will be about operating models and hybrid working and supporting our people, and people, as you said, Shona, have begun to look at different sectors and kind of shift roles, and it's really, really important that people think about what skills have they got now, where are the jobs in our businesses and in our regions, where do people need to think about reskilling, or just repackaging and taking a different look at the skills they've already got, but how does that fit for another sector or another role? So change is the one thing that doesn't ever go away, does it? And it can be very destabilizing when we're not in control of it, which I think has, you know, really affected us over the last well, it's getting on for 18 months, isn't it? Which is really quite scary. However, when you're in more control of the change and you're doing things on purpose rather than reacting to them, it always feels like you're in a much better position. So I'm delighted that some of these numbers will help people do some of that. And I think that's again a sort of an overriding, we always say this, but the overriding ask is that businesses get the support they need at the time that they need it, and when governments can get out of the way and just let us get on and do what we do best, which is finding those opportunities in those markets and taking advantage of them, then that's really what does our businesses best. So I'm hugely looking forward to what happens next quarter. You feel like you're wishing your life away, but it's been really interesting. And launching that business sentiment index and having an indicator that helps us, do a little bit of gazing into the future is really quite positive and inspiring. I don't need much encouragement to be optimistic, so it's great to have someone like Shona who is a realist and pulls me back. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed the session as always. Massive thank you to Wayne and to the graduate apprenticeship programme at Dundee University. We have got his contact details, and I'll put those onto the YouTube description again if you'd like to get in touch. But please have a look at that programme. And thank you to Shona, thank you to Sarah for all her organising skills as always, and a massive thanks to everyone that tuned in and who's watched this back on our YouTube channel, and to those of you that took part in the survey. We really appreciate every single insight that you give us, and we know, as Shona said, that it's measured and it's deliberate, and it's really helping us work out what's happening with the local economy. So until the next time, the one day I would put in your diaries, because we're reopening and it's very exciting. We've already done one networking event in Dundee, and our next networking event, we're heading to Angus. So next Tuesday, the 13th of July, we're going to be taking a wander around Miniki Country Park. A little bit of networking, a little bit of a chance to get out and about and just cement some relationships and see some people you've not seen for ages. And we'll do a bit of a sun dance, so hopefully the weather is kind to us, because the weather we got in Dundee was absolutely stunning. So we know we're in a brilliant part of the world, and it'll be great to get out and about and just do some catching up with some business contacts. So hope to see you there, and really look forward to seeing you all again next time. And thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Thank you, folks.